Hello everyone, Duplex here with another Android Netrunner video. It's been a while since I posted, so I thought I would go ahead and post a quick deck video where I talk about my current build, my current Kate build. Anybody who knows me knows that I am primarily a Shaper player on the runner side, and of the Shaper IDs, it's almost exclusively Kate that I play. I've delved briefly into the realms of Kit and Exile and Chaos Theory in the past, but have always ended up coming back to Kate, and that's where I currently sit as well. So, just a quick conversation about the deck. It has it was sort of built with an Atman theme in mind. It's an elaboration on some of the Atman decks that were going around near last year's Gen Con, for example, and that I think came second or third place in second place, I believe, at Worlds. And the build is in this case. Many of those components are still present in this deck, but the build has been elaborated as the game has, I would say, significantly evolved since even Worlds last November, and certainly since Gen Con of last year. So the build goes sort of like this. Like I said, it's based on an Atman build, but we only have 2 copies of Atman sitting in the deck at this point. Like the old pure Atman builds, there's Desperado, but once again the numbers drop down, I think, to 2. I think there was technically 3 in most of those popular builds, so it's down to 2. Data Sucker and Parasite, but only 2 Data Suckers and only the 1 Parasite in this version. And test runs again down to 2. Scavenge is down to 2. And from there, the primary economy engine is Daily Cast, Katie Jones, and Pro Contacts. There's 3 Sure Gambles in there as well as a Stim Hack for emergencies. Secondary breakers, there's tons of them. So there's Snowball, which originally was an Inti due to its free install. However, I recognize that Kate gets it a little bit cheaper because of her discount, and with 3 modded sitting in the deck, it might be one of those cards that I get to mod it out. I figured even if it wasn't, 3 is not necessarily that bad a price to pay. It's mostly there because of wraparound. That's why Inti was in there originally, just simply as a free kind of counter to wraparound. But I find Snowball ends up gets a little bit more mileage. You end up being able to break like Wall of Static and even Eli's somewhat more affordably, and Bastion more affordably than you could with Inti. Inti, of course, starts off at 1 strength as well, but it's a 2 bits or 2 credits for 1 + 1 strength, whereas Snowball, and they're both until the end of the run, but Snowball has the 1-to-1 ratio, so it's just better. It leaves low end walls within reach, saving your Atman for other values. So Femme Fatale is just a workhorse in every deck that I've ever used her in. I almost have trouble building decks without her. I find that not only is she a decent breaker for low-end sentries, but just her ability to bypass is so brutal. That I can't. Like I said, I almost can't live without her. She couples well, of course, with Scavenge, of which I have 2, and Test Run, of which I have 2, and yeah, I can't. I mean, anybody who's played this game for any duration of time knows how good she is, how good Femme Fatale is, and don't need me to explain that to them. People who haven't been playing for a long time, I don't know. I think people generally love Femme. I think I've seen a lot more runner decks running without her lately, but again, I'm just kind of stuck on her. So, and beyond that, I also have a Yogg for free access to through lower end code gates. I don't use it all that often, to be honest, but certain times it's come out and sort of saved my hide. It's one of those cards that I'm not 100% sold on in this deck, that if I had something else that I wanted to swap it out for, it would likely come out. Just because everything it does for free, my Atmans can usually do for, some value slightly greater than 0, but not necessarily so much. So I don't know. Again, it's a decent secondary breaker, so it's there, and I had the extra influence to work on with it. Of course, Data Sucker and Parasite is a very, very well-known combo, and mixed with Desperado, it's just killer. You're getting sucker tokens, you're getting money, and those sucker tokens can then be used for ice destruction. With Parasite, you get your 3 clone chips to help recycle Parasite. If you need to get into some fairly heavy ice destruction, you can do that. You can also use Test Run to recycle Parasites if absolutely necessary. It's not exactly efficient, but it works. So yeah, again, I can't say enough about that combo. It lets you deal with things like roto turrets and even swordsmen and that sort of thing fairly efficiently. Ice that would be low strength but more costly to get through is typically better to Parasite and kill, I find. Of course, the self-modifying codes are the primary tutor, primary during the run tutor, quote unquote. And I mean, I absolutely the value of the card itself is, I mean, it's a free program. The 2 cost for actually firing it off and tutoring a card in can sometimes feel like a lot. But I can't understate the just psychological value of having a SMC sitting on the table, and some credits with which to use it, because the Corp starts to look at that as a loaded gun and starts to really recognize that they need to vary their ice on their servers, because a single self-modifying code on the table really lets you find whichever breaker you need. With Atman, it's it doesn't need to be sold. It's pretty much a staple shaper card at this point. Of course, I've seen many shapered builds running without it, but for this kind of deck, it's absolutely necessary. So like I said, the clone chip helps with that. The clone chip will also let you, of course, recycle things that either get trash from destroyers or whatever. Speaking of destroyers, there is a copy of Sharpshooter that I didn't mention for some reason. It doesn't get used tons. Mostly it's Archer. It's there to break archers efficiently. And like Deus Ex, which I guess I also didn't talk about, like Deus Ex, it's recyclable, of course, and situational. Deus Ex is great. It's just, again, another workhorse card. There's tons of AP ice that it lets you just break through, and the ability to prevent any amount of net damage is just great against high damage corp decks. It saved me more than once, and Sharpshooter is similar in that it'll push me past the archer or it may even make him not res archer, it's kind of demoralizing. If it's sitting on the table, the psychological value again is significant. It's hard to give up that agenda when you see, and Teresa, an archer, when you see a sharpshooter sitting there, which allows you to break through an archer for 2 credits. And a trash, right? So it's just, again, a very nice tool. This deck ends up kind of being a Swiss Army knife deck, in that it has kind of an answer for everything. So like I said, Deus Ex for the APs, Atmans for everything else, Fems to bypass things like Tollbooth and Data Raven are always great targets for Fem. Snowball's there for wraparound primarily, but can be used to pass lower strength walls, and it's the same thing with Yogg for code gates. Data Sucker Parasite for ice destruction. Nerve Agent is primarily there as an answer to cerebral imaging decks that want to carry a handful of cards until they can pull off their Uber combo. I often was finding that I was running without any kind of HQ, multi-access HQ, and those decks were just kind of cleaning the floor with me on a regular basis. On the other hand, R&D interface is really the deck's win strategy. So big digs into R&D are what the deck likes to do to win, but it can do it can get in pretty much anywhere once it's up and running. And of course, the economy is very standard, I think. 2 copies of Katie Jones for your slow build. The daily casts can be really nice. I find them slow, of course, but you get 1 or 2 up at a time. You get 2 or even if you have 2 up at a time. The 4 per turn is very nice. It starts to build quickly, and it doesn't happen all that often, but it's nice when you can get 2 of them up at once. And then of course Pro Contacts is a great card for doing what you need to do anyway, which is draw cards. It pays you for that, and I don't need to sell it, I don't think, to anybody. Lots of people use it. And it's very, very nice when it hits the table against Jinteki net damage builds, because, again, they look at it and go, great. Here's a efficient way for him to restock his hand after taking a bunch of net damage, and he's going to get the bonus of money for it at the same time. It's extremely demoralizing, so it's a nice card to have in there. The way the deck plays, I think I've gone pretty straightforward over that. It's an R&D interface, R&D dig deck, so your primary target is R&D, but remotes and or HQ are always valid targets, especially if you can be pretty sure that the corp is hiding something good there. Stim hack can be nice and surprising because you bust it out right when the corp thinks they have a scoring window. I find I tend to save it for match point runs because I hate taking the brain damage, but sometimes I'll use it, and you just got to weigh the pros with the cons there. Memory issues are fairly non-existent. You don't tend to want everything out at once. The 2 mem chips plus Desperado will usually cover it. The beauty of the mem chips are, of course, that they are free when you install with Kate's bonus discount. So again, you don't typically have every program out at once. It's a very situational kind of build. Atman, I tend to very rarely have more than 1 out, but sometimes you end up with the pair. It's just, again, it's going to be depending on the kind of the deck that you're playing against, and what it is you're trying to get through. So there's no, other than Pro Contacts, there's no sort of fast card draw, no equality times or diesels, and I kind of like it that way. For a while, I think I played with diesels in the deck and just found that I find that I don't use them enough because I'd rather just use the pro contacts especially if it's out. So I don't know. I could probably put one or two diesels in if I had something else to take out, but I really don't find that I use them often. Of course, there's 2 plasticrete carapace in here as well, just because the deck does tend to like to run fairly aggressively, though not often quickly in the early game. And so to counter things like punitive Counter-Strike and Sea Scorch and whatnot, you still probably need plasticrete carapace. The funny thing is that the Ken Tenema criminal deck that I've been running lately hasn't got any plasticrete carapace, and it's sort of a blitz deck with the idea that you kind of just got to go all in and pray to whatever to that you don't get scorched, and it's fun when you don't, and really crappy when you do, but I don't tend to play that way with my Kate deck. So I'll tend to mulligan for things like pro contacts and or Katie Jones, or at very least a daily casts. I like to see at least, this is actually a decent opening hand, I'd probably keep it. I like to see at least some kind of tutor, whether it's a test run or an SMC, and then some other cards. If I was playing against Jinteki, this would just be an absolutely stellar starting hand, because it's the 2 main anti-Jinteki tools that this deck runs, which are Pro Contacts and Deus Ex, and I'm modded to put the Deus Ex out for free if I want. So I would probably keep that, and that's a bit tougher. At least I have a sure gamble, but it's kind of dangerous to rely on sure gambles early game, because often I find that I'll fire it and then not see any economy for a little while, and that those initial 9 credits will sometimes wear thin. That's definitely a keeper. It's got some good elements. So I find that because the deck does so many different things, it tends to draw opening hands that are kind of fun and usually interesting, and I don't tend to mulligan tons. I probably would mulligan that, although the Desperado helps it out. It's almost an economy card by itself, and there's a fairly decent draw, I guess. But anyway, that's the deck, and that's the idea behind it. Feel free to critique it and or try it out and let me know what you think, and post any comments you have. And until next time, we'll see you later.